Okay, so I'm gonna begin quickly today. So I hope that all of us you were in the global meeting yesterday. So Dua gave a very nice presentation about the basics of soldering, and I think I'm gonna reuse this video also during the actual week. When we are going to cover the basics of electronics production. But today, so I'm going to continue with our task of building a website and making it compatible with the Fab Academy course. So we need to build a documentation website where we could describe everything that we are doing during the course this week. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. Because this year I'm spending a little bit of time in order to understand the history of the technologies that are involved. And yeah, and I'm finding some interesting things. I hope that these are going to be interesting for you as well. And then I'm going to talk about a few essential things that you should know about Git and GitLab and GitLab CI. And then I'm going to continue for the rest of the time with a demonstration, so which is basically going to be based on the things that we did the 2 previous days, so on Monday and Tuesday. So GitLab. So GitLab is an online platform, a web-based DevOps tool, so which is sort of a hosting website for your Git repository projects, but not just that. That's the logo on the right side. So many of you have seen this throughout the slides already this week and the last week. And it is an open source, open core business model that they are running. So the software itself, it's with MIT, it's licensed under the MIT license. So it's an open source product. It's not just that it's gitlab.com. You can install it also on your own server and use it to manage your own software projects. So this is also one of the reasons why Fab Academy is using GitLab on their Fab Cloud. And open core means that so the main product, so this open source GitLab software can be used freely. So MIT license is allowing completely uncontrolled use of the software in a way. You just need to mention the authors of the project, but then it doesn't matter whether you use it for your open project, commercial project, proprietary solution, in-house, out-house. You just need to mention. So if you tell somebody about the project, about the software, then you just need to mention the authors, which in this case is Valery Sizo and Dmitry Zaporozhets. So these are the core developers. So these two people who started it, but there are a lot more developers that have joined the efforts towards making it better. And probably you should just refer them as team. And it was interesting for me to find out that it's initially a Ukrainian company, but now, of course, they are based in the US. I think probably in San Francisco, that I didn't find out yet. But so these two people, they are the starters of GitLab. At the time, I think GitHub was already there, but I think these guys developed a much more interesting business model. And once I noticed the name Zaporozhets, that made me remember the short period of time that I spent of my life in the Soviet Union. So before the 90s. So my birth year is 1984, and the Soviet Union ended 1991. So I had 6 years experience living in the Soviet Union. And Zaporozhets, I remember it since my childhood because the grandpa of my best friend had one. And this is this car, so which is Ukrainian production. It's an Ukrainian brand, Zaporozhets. So it's so at the time, somewhere around 50s, 60s, every national country, every bigger, more successful national country, they tried to build their own car, affordable car for their own people. And the Soviet Union, it was no exception, and came up with this super mini people's car for the citizen of the Soviet Union called Zaporozhets. And it's in some ways similar to the Volkswagen concept, and I think Italians, they had Fiat, and other countries, other cars. And yeah, so this is made in around 58 in the ZAZ factory in the Soviet Ukraine. But yeah, about GitLab. So GitLab offers you Git repository hosting. It's very similar to GitHub. But the main difference from GitHub initially was that it offers you the full DevOps cycle, which means you can plan and create. So plan and create this project on GitLab. On GitHub, you could do also this, but then you could not build on GitLab. You could build your project from the beginning. Used its integrated automated tools, verify, test, and then you could also automatically deploy and monitor it afterwards. So internally, they use heavily technology that's called Docker. I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but here on the right, you can see a diagram about how it works roughly. So there are people who are pushing to a Git repository. So here it's called check-in, but basically they are pushing to the source repository using git push. And then the source repository detects whenever somebody has pushed, and then given or not, there's a configuration file which then triggers a CI server on the same server where GitLab is hosted. And you can build and test and then also collect the result. So it could be a binary. In our case, it's just a website. And then you can also instruct the CI server to deploy or continuously deploy the result. In our case, here in between, there's going to be a web server which is going to host our website automatically. So the power in GitLab is that it allows not just to host the repository so that we can collaborate with other people, but it allows also to automate the life cycle of the software. So with websites, it's really nice. So instead of every time when you need to change the website, uploading a set of files through a SFTP manager or a file manager, you can just you can use Git in order to version control and also update the website automatically. So once you push to the version control server, the version control server picks it up. It pushes it forward to a continuous integration server. And then there's a bunch of robots which are doing work for you and publishing the website on the web server automatically. And this is also how it's going to happen with your websites and how it should happen with your websites in the Fab Academy. So there's a rough diagram, but there's a text missing over here. I don't know where it went, but okay. There should be an address over here, but you're going to get that anyway. So here on the left side, we see what we got so far. So let's say we have our own repository with our HTML page or set of pages, or Git repository, basically. Whenever we make changes, a set of changes, some commits, like with the git commit command, we are finally ready to deploy. And once we are ready once we are ready to deploy, we can run git push, and it's going to transfer all the changes to the GitLab repository on the GitLab server. So in order to have a GitLab repository on the GitLab server, you need to have a GitLab account. So the task for today is going to be for you to create a GitLab account. For the official Fab Academy students, if you do not have a message from the central coordination with information how to get into your GitLab account on Fab Cloud, then it's going to arrive soon. The plan is to have that message ready, so to have your Git repository ready on the Fab Cloud before tomorrow, when I'm gonna talk one more time about HTML basics in the global class. And then once you have a GitLab account, you can make a GitLab repository, which we are going to call Fab Academy. And that GitLab repository is going to contain all the HTML files. And we are going to add a special file, which is going to be called Git Lab CI YAML. So it's important that you get the name exactly as it's written here. And for every push, it's going to activate the GitLab CI pipeline. So it's called officially on the GitLab server, which is going to publish your website. And here, up here, there's an address. I'm going to fix the PDF after, before sharing, and maybe the video as well. So, and in order for you to push to the repository, you will need to configure your SSH public key. You will need to give your SSH public key to the GitLab server so it recognizes your computer and it doesn't ask you for the password. It's especially important if you're working with if your account is protected by using two-factor authentication, because if you don't have the SSH handshake in place with the GitLab server, then every time you push, it's not just going to ask you for the password, for the username and password of the server, but it's also going to ask you to authenticate with the two-factor authentication token, which is a unique token that is regenerated every minute or so. So you need to set up this in order to make your own life easier. So yeah, I feel that not too many of you know what SSH is. So SSH means secure shell. So it's a way how you can communicate with another computer or another person on another computer through encrypted communication. So that on your computer, when you write something in the terminal, let's say a command, like we did yesterday with the remote web server, and we opened Nano. So how to make sure that people in between cannot capture and cannot tell what commands are you sending to this server. And in order for other people not to find it out, you need to encrypt the data, and then for the other person or the other computer on the other end, you need to give that instance some sort of a key so that that other server can decode the message or the command that you are sending. So this is professionally called as the private public key cryptography. So in order to decode a message, you will sometimes you will need both keys, and sometimes you will need one of the keys. So basically, when you encode your message using your private key, you should be able to decode the message using the public key. That's roughly. So I didn't kind of rehearse on this part. So you can always open the Wikipedia page about SSH and cryptography if you want to find out for sure. But yeah, public-private key cryptography. And it's going to enable you to be able to communicate with the GitLab server by using passwordless communication. So since you have your public key in place on the server, so it's going to recognize that it is you who is sending the message, who is sending the command, and it's gonna allow you to do something with your GitLab account remotely. Also check out this how does SSH work, this tutorial. I think Hostinger, I think it's a Lithuanian company, and I found it randomly. So it was one of the first pages that jumped up when I looked for another SSH tutorial. And it's quite recent one. It's June 16th, 2020. And they are one of the guys who are sponsoring an annual hacker camp, which is happening every year not far from Vilnius in the forest. And the only way how you can get in there is not by buying a ticket, but by offering a workshop. So it's called No Trolls Allowed. So it's pretty much it used to be more like an Eastern European phenomena, because there are trolls from the East who are trying to tinker with the minds of people in the Eastern Europe, but now it's rather a global problem. So, but yeah, check it out. So when Corona is over, that's one of the places, one of the camps where I would recommend to go. Then, yeah, in order to establish this passwordless communication with the GitLab server, you will need to generate SSH key, and this is done by using your terminal. If you have used some SSH-related things before, then you probably have the SSH already, SSH key already. It looks similar to the so the file name should look similar to the file name that you see here. So, and in order to print this key, so yeah, when you generate it, there's going to be some extra things that are going to happen in between before the key is going to be generated. But I'm going to do a demonstration so you know for sure, so you see how it works. And then after you generate the key, you need to print it and copy it. So cat in Linux and Unix systems, so in the terminal, means that it's just going to print out the contents of the file in the terminal. And then you can copy that output and paste it into the SSH keys section of your GitLab account. And then there's a documentation site on GitLab itself about how to, a bit more information about how to do. So this is really the basics, but then if you're more interested in it, then you can always visit the documentation website. And in order to make the GitLab repository to build automatically and to continuously deploy your HTML web page, you will need to create GitLab CI YAML. So here there's a wrong spelling. There should be dot and lowercase g. Yeah, up here, but here it's correct. Yeah, I'm just spotting some mistakes that I'm gonna fix when I upload the PDF of the slides. But the contents of the file should be as follows. So the first line just describes the name of the job that the GitLab runner should run, and this identifier is important because this is going to be associated with the GitLab pages. It's going to be associated with the GitLab pages infrastructure. So the GitLab pages robot, so to say, is going to pick this up, and it's going to launch a Docker image. And the Docker image is sort of a virtual computer somewhere in the cloud, and it's kind of as if you would be installing a little Linux distribution, and then you would open the root user account in terminal, and then here where the script part is, these are lines that then are going to be executed in this virtual cloud instance of little Linux, and it's going to do something that you tell it to do. In this case, it's making a hidden directory, so the dot makes it hidden on Linux systems. Then it's going to copy all the files from the current repository to this hidden directory. So also, so when we are talking about continuous deployment systems, then at this point, you should assume that the repository of yours is already cloned. So it would be as if you would be going to, let's say, to the desktop or to a project folder on your computer. You'd issue git clone. You would get a directory of the project name, and then you would cd into it. And then these commands follow after that. And what happens here on the third line is that the hidden directory is being renamed from hidden folder public to a visible folder public. Yes, so like in command line, you can use a move or like mv command in order to rename files and directories. And then the following part where you see the artifacts, it is basically telling that these paths of the virtual cloud little Linux system have to be preserved. So in this case, it's just in the public folder, but so in other contexts, it could be something else. It could be, let's say, if you are compiling a Go program, or you are producing a PDF from a set of scripts and templates, then you could just tell the GitLab CI robot to save them, so you can download them after the job has been run. And this one tells the GitLab CI server to do it only on the branch master. Yeah, yesterday I tried to rename it to something else, but yeah, we could try to do this throughout the course. So demonstration time. I'm gonna, no, not thank you yet. So this is our website. And then this is the directory where we left off yesterday. So I'm going to open it in terminal like this. And what I am going to do is I'm going to create a new SSH key first. So for that, you need to use the SSH key again. So in different systems, there are going to be different ways how to install it. So in Linux systems, you'll use this sudo apt install SSH. Yeah, you actually need to SSH tools. Yeah, you'll need to install the SSH tools. On Mac OS, if you installed Homebrew, it's probably the same, but mostly it's that on the systems, it's already there. So you shouldn't worry about that. But if you run into problems, then make sure that it actually is installed. And then -t means that what kind of key, what type of key you want to create. And GitLab recommends, and also GitHub these days, to create this type. I would like to know more about cryptography to be able to explain what it is actually. So, and for the C, for the comment, I'm just gonna add demo key, hit enter. Now it's generating public-private key pair, and it's asking whether I want to save it at this location. And I'm gonna rather enter it somewhere else because I don't want to overwrite my existing key. And this is really so how paranoid you are. So if you really want to make it secure and you're gonna be sure that you'll remember the passphrase, enter one. But if not, then it's fine.
Sorry, where could we got the ed this term like ed 25519? Is
That's
that
the so ID. It's like the identifier. It's
okay?
your ID. It stands for your ID, and then ED 25519. It's the type of the key that you ask for the SSH key can to generate. But that's really some details. You will need to do this only once to set up your GitLab, and that's it. And now here you see it created two files. So it created, so this ID ED25519 is the private key. It's important that you do not show it to anybody. So sometimes when you, let's say, want your repository to be also accessible from another device, then you will need to transfer your private key to this other device. But otherwise, this should be always on a place where you know where it is, and that's yours. And then there's the public key. So this is the public part of it. And this is important for other devices to recognize your device. So these two are connected in a special way that if you create a file using this private key, then somebody else using the public key can identify that it's made with the identity of your private key. So it is a way how to make sure that, let's say, you are the unique person who is sending a message over the internet. Or yeah, we should organize a crypto party about these kind of things. I think Rasmus some years ago was actually doing that in the media lab, and so like individual knowledge of cryptography these days, I think, and data privacy is kind of a big thing.
Basically,
So yeah,
yeah, sorry, we will get that once we open an account under GitLab. Then after that, we will get this ID to do the similar thing with yours, right?
no, now so now I'm going to show you how does it what do you need to do on the GitLab side in a second. So what you need to know is that, so this string of letters. So this is the public key, and I'm not afraid of sharing it in any way. You shouldn't be neither. So anyways, like with these kind of things, you shouldn't post it on a Facebook on your wall or on Twitter. So you just try to copy them wherever you really need them. And so this is the key that we are going to copy and paste into our GitLab account. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go to GitLab. And I'm logged in as myself. And I'm going to create a, no, before I create a new project, I'm going to go to settings here. And let's expand this. So, and here on the left side in the menu, you will see SSH keys. And I'll take this, copy it. So on Linux, you need to copy by using Control Shift and C, not just Control C. On Mac OS terminal, it's easier. And I think on Windows, when you're using the commander, so CM there, then you will need to select, when you select the text, then it's just going to copy it automatically, or in the worst case, you will need to right click and it's going to offer you the copy feature. And just paste it here. And you can set up some more details. Let's say that you want somebody else to access your Git repository, then you can allow that someone to access it only for a month. Let's say if the project is lasts 1 month and then more. So you see I have some keys already added here, quite a lot. So I can access the GitLab repository from my different Raspberry Pi installations or from my different servers and so on. And I can add this one as well here. And at this point, I can go over and let's go to the main page. So this is the dashboard of my GitLab account, and I'm going to create a new project, just blank project, and I'm going to call it Fab Academy. And you see, like, there's something already happening. So there's project URL. So this is going to be the base part of the URL, and then you need so the GitLab is trying to come up with a URL friendly name. So it's taking these capital letters and making them lowercase, and then wherever there's space, it is inserting a special character, in this case, a dash. So you can modify it if you want, but usually the default choices of GitLab are fine. Here you can enter a short description. This is going to be Fab Academy demo documentation website. And so you can define a visibility level. In our case, we need it public. And do not initialize it with a README, because what we want to do now, after we initialize it, we want to have the repository completely empty so we can actually upload the Git repository that we made yesterday. We click on Create Project. And here, usually also have some basic information about what you should do. So yesterday I covered how to do the basic configuration of your Git installation. So it's important that you specify a username, that you specify your email. So these two are going to be used for your Git commits in order to sign your commits. And then, so here's, in case you don't have a repository, you can create one, and then you can link it to this GitLab repository. But if you have an existing folder, so if you were following the instructions that I showed you yesterday, then you have an existing folder. So this instructs you how to add a repository remotely. So we did already the git init. We already added. So this is when you have a folder, but this is when you have a repository. So we covered the repository creation yesterday. So this is the part that you actually need to use. So you need to cd into it. Then you need to rename the remote in case you have one, but we don't. So we just need to add a new origin. So we just need to start from this line. Let's do it. Here, I'm going to remove these two keys that I generated because I already have a key added. So I'm going to remove. In order to remove a file, you use the rm command, and you can specify multiple files separated with a space after those. And when you hit enter, those files will be effectively deleted. And these are going to be really deleted. You'll be able to recover it only using some specialized software. These are not being sent to trash. So be careful. As you see, the directory is clean. And you can type git status to see what's going on. So I didn't commit yesterday, so I can type git diff to see what I actually did. So yeah, it seems that I added some links. So I actually added links to the menu. So let's register that. And it's still not fine. So it's showing us that there are untracked files, which is about HTML. So there's a new page that we added. So now it's in the staging area, and we can git commit. Just before we push it to GitLab, and we'll just check the log. So this is the log. These are all the things that we did with our site yesterday and today. And since we are in the repository already, so we can just copy and paste this one. And hit enter. And now if we type git remote -v, it's going to show us all the remote locations that we have. In this case, we have only one. It showed us 2 entries because for each of these activities. So this is fetching is basically pulling from the remote, from GitLab, and then pushing is basically uploading files or changes to GitLab. So for each of those, you need to specify an address. So Git does it automatically whenever you specify, or whenever you add a remote. But yeah, but there are 2 entries for each of these. And yeah, and then you can copy the other commands. So it's important that you use these flags here so that it's completely pushes everything that you have in the repository in case you have more than you know. And if everything is fine, if you set up your SSH key correctly, then you should get this message. Branch master, set up the track, remote branch master from origin. And then in case you have tags, then you can use also this command. But in our case, we don't have tags. And yeah, for beginner use of Git, it's maybe too much of information. So after you push, you can now refresh this page. You will see that all the files that we care about are there. Usually, these repositories, they have a rectangle where you have a description about a project. And it's usually called a README. And let's make a README file, so which describes what this project is about. And so in the case, if you're opening the source up or you're collaborating with someone, then it's the right place where to describe how to contribute to the repository or how to set up your local development environment, what packages to install, and so on. So I'm back in the terminal locally here. I'm going to use the touch command that I talked about briefly yesterday. I'm going to create a read MD file. I could just create a plain README, but I'm going to add this MD because I want my text to be written in Markdown form. Shortly about Markdown. So Markdown is a simple and easy to use markup language that you can use to format virtually any document. So it's a simplified, you can look at it as a simplified version as HTML. So it's easier to write and it's kind of human readable. It becomes human readable even if you are viewing a text document in a regular, in a plain text editor. So if you want to read more, so I mean, I'm gonna talk about it and show more about Markdown when we are gonna get to this static website generator part of this week's content. But yeah, so here I am going to use nano this time in order to populate the content into the README file. So I'm going to start with a title and H1. So if you remember from HTML, the headings, then H1 or heading 1 is represented, is identified by a single hash. And a plain paragraph, it's just plain text. So if you can separate paragraphs from each other by adding a new line in between them. Yeah. And then if you use double hash, that means that it's heading 2. And the number of hash characters, hashtags, they define which level of heading it's going to be. And let's add another section. Let's call it somehow like and let's add a link here. In Markdown, in order to add a link, you enclose the text that you want to be the text that appears as a link in the so in these square brackets, and then you use the regular brackets in order to add the link or the URL. Even justify the text here by pressing Control J. And in order to exit and save it, I'm going to press Control X and hit Y as like yes, that I want to save it. And I'm going to save it as the same file. So here I'm going to just hit Enter. And you see there's a README file. I type git status. I see that their untracked file. It is untracked. I'm going to git add README get and add a message to it that to the comment that I added a README file. And then I'm going to use git push in order to push it to the remote repository. And now here, if I refresh the repository page, you'll see that the README is detected as the first file to be read in this repository context. And here you can see that the H1 is bigger, H2 is smaller. You can even take a closer look in the inspection tools of the web browser in order to double check what element it is. Where can we see it? Yeah, H2. So this is H2. So next, I was talking about continuous integration. So the easiest way to get your website published is to add the Git Lab CI file. So I showed the contents of it on the slides, but there's an easier way to add it automatically from the GitLab interface. So if I expand this, so when you're on your repository page, you will see this drop down with the plus icon over here. So this is a way how you can add additional files to your repository through the GitLab interface. So you can use basically GitLab interface as a content management tool if you want. I will show you that if we'll have some extra time. So you click on this and you click on the new file item. And it's gonna offer you with templates, with a choice of templates. And in this case, we want to have this GitLab CI template, CI, and you can get different versions of this GitLab CI, so different pre-compiled versions of it. So you can, for example, compile and test C++ code or Bash or Go, do something with a Node.js program, test what's going on with your PHP, even Rust, Python. And then pages, it's they're just this offers you a list of static website generators that you can use on your repository in order to generate static website from source. And the simplest is just plain HTML, so it's not really a static website generator, it's just a static website, so there's no generator in between. And later, tomorrow, I'm going to talk about how to use Hugo. So with HTML, so you just need to select this, and there is going still to be something that goes on. So I explained this previously, but so basically this is the same file that I showed you previously on the slides. And what do we need to do with this one? We can enter a commit message. So this basically is the same that we are entering when we are issuing git commit -m in terminal. Without a dot. And you can choose the branch in case you have multiple branches. You save. And what you will see when you go back to the main repository, so the root of the repository, you will see that this blue icon appears. And when you hover it, it's going to tell you that pipeline is running. You can click on it. And you will see that there's a number of jobs running. So depending on what is your configuration file, you will see one or more jobs. In this case, we only have the pages job running. And when you click on that, you'll see that like another terminal. So this is like a terminal within a web page, which is basically showing you what's happening with this mini Linux system on the cloud. So you see that it's pulling a Docker image, and then preparing the environment, then some. So it's basically cloning the repository, and then you see it's executing the script that you saw in this Git Lab CI file. So it's making a hidden directory, and it's copying all the files there, and then it's renaming the hidden directory, and then it's uploading the artifacts. And there are no errors on the way, so it's just declaring that the job succeeded. So it's uploading the artifacts and killing the Docker image. And here you can see that there are job artifacts, and you can actually browse them and see what's in there. So there's a folder called public, and here are all the files that we basically have in our repository. And what's from there? So when we go back to this Fab Academy thing here, we can go to the settings part of the project and can click on pages. And here you will see the link where your website has been actually uploaded. So when you click on this, it's going to open your website. And now if you will try to open this link yourself, you'll see that it's also available to you, because I just published it. You just need to double check if the other settings of the repository are all right. So I go to General, and under the Visibility, Project Features, and Permissions, you should double check that pages are accessible to everyone. So that's that for today. I think I managed to contain it within 50 or 45 minutes this time. I hope that it made some sense to you. So yeah, what I would like to remind you, just try to make your GitLab account and try to make a repository called Fab Academy. So this goes for the people who are joining the digital fabrication course. So for the people who are official Fab Academy students, you should wait for the central coordination to send you a ready repository already, and then you would start from there. Yeah, so I think we have 1 minute for some basic questions, and then we can switch over to the global.
So if we miss the GitLab to the file, then we cannot really publish it. We just publish on our own Raspberry, right? The final.
Yeah, but then it happens more like manually. So this flow is to automate so that you can work with your Git repository. And then you configure this continuous integration file once. And then every time you change something in your code, this flow that you describe in the CI file is always going to be repeated. So in a like very so how I can describe this better is that sometimes when you're building software, so in my case I have this PyMapper software on GitLab. Sometimes you want to automatically do a bit more complex things. Like in this case, I want the disk image to be compiled automatically. So I'm describing all the flow, all the necessary things in order for GitLab to compile an image file for the Raspberry Pi automatically. Because previously, when I would make changes to the PyMapper, I would need to spend a weekend in order to package it so that I could put it on the website for others to download. But now, if I change something and I test it on my side, I can just push it to the server. A few hours pass, the image file is being compiled, and it's automatically published on the website. So all of these things you could do manually on the Raspberry Pi in order to publish your website or whatever code on the Raspberry Pi. But if you're in a flow and you do many changes very often, and you don't want to kind of go through these things manually every time when you want to deploy your code on the Raspberry Pi on a web server, then you can use GitLab in order to automate it for you. Before we finish, I would so if you add this CI file through the GitLab interface, then you need to update your local repository by issuing git pull. And you see it shows you that a new file was added. So you can treat the GitLab repository as another collaborator of yours in this case, but it's just another interface that you were using in order to push to the GitLab repository. So you need to get these in sync. So if you're doing something through the web interface, which is not recommended, so this is the only use when you use the web interface, when you should use the web interface in order to make this GitLab CI YAML file. And when you understand more about it, you should avoid using the interface. So when you do it here, then you need to pull the changes in so that your repository is in sync, because it's going to be difficult to kind of get out of the mess if you start building your things on top of older version of the code.
Okay.
Quick question about like there was the GitLab also like the fabcloud.org URL hosted.
Yeah.
So is it the problem I realized I somehow logged in via that, and then I see like I already had a GitLab account, but now I created it under the, I think I created an account to the FabCloud thing, but I'm not, I'm just attending the course, so should I just do it on a personal?
Yeah, you should do it on a personal GitLab.com account.
Yeah, I'll just unlink this and something. Yeah, thanks.
All right, I think that's it. Let's switch over to the global. See you there.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.